Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a quick, brand new episode of Kaiju Conversation. I'm your host, Elijah, and joining me from our Discord servers, Jurgon.
Hello, good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on such short notice. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
Oh, just wonderful. Just wonderful.
Wonderful is pretty good.
Yeah, I enjoy being wonderful.
That you are. I wish I could say we enjoyed it as well, but
So, how have you been? I mean, you've never been on the podcast. If you want to introduce yourself, go for it. Just general discussion right now.
yeah, sure. I've been doing all right. Nothing too unique about myself. I enjoy Godzilla and Tokusatsu generally, but it's for me.
Oh, you also enjoy Evangelion, which is kind of weird.
I wouldn't call it weird, but yeah, I really enjoy it. It's maybe one of my. I'm not sure if I call it my favorite anime series quite, but it's definitely up there.
You are objectively wrong.
Fair.
Maybe maybe you should be on the podcast to talk about Evangelion, because I will never like that thing. Whatever that was, I'm never going to be a fan.
Did you even make it all the way through?
I did. So I watched the entire show. I started watching Death and Rebirth, but then I realized it was a compilation thing, and I
Yeah,
didn't
no.
really care. And then I watched End of Evangelion, and while watching that, I realized that I made a grave mistake watching it at a restaurant while eating my pizza.
Yeah, that was definitely up there on your list of mistakes for watching it, but watching the show itself was not among them.
Uh, eh,
But maybe, if you ever want to give it a retry, you could maybe do the Rebuild series. It's kind of a
I
little more condensed, and I mean the animation's gorgeous, so that's definitely a plus for me at least.
admittedly I have considered rewatching them in the Rebuild series, especially now that all of them are out. But I don't know. I have such a bad taste that it's gonna take me a bit to get used to it.
Yeah, well, maybe give it a few years, and if you ever feel like giving it another try, then that might be the way to do it.
Yeah, I've considered so I know I've got some friends that would like to watch it. I've considered like doing a watch party, but then I'm like, am I really willing to put forth that much effort for Evangelion? And the answer is always no. So maybe one day, maybe.
Yeah, like I said, give it some time, and it might come around one day when you're feeling open-minded. I mean, it's just a few movies if you want to go that route.
Yeah. I've got a friend who went to Japan to see the most recent one, and he really liked it. So
Oh,
maybe it's worth something.
I'm so jealous. I wish I could have done that. I still have yet to see it.
Yeah, he goes to Japan like every year. Like I am beyond jealous.
Yeah, some people just have it good like that, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe one day I could go and enjoy it. That it'd be fun, to say the least.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm especially curious because right now the Tokyo Olympics are going on. Kind of curious what the culture of Japan will do afterwards, if it'll, because like after the original Tokyo Olympics in 1964, like their economy really, like the awareness of Japan really like boosted in popularity. So I'm curious if that'll happen again. It'd be kind of cool if it did.
Yeah, it would. I'm not sure if that would really happen. I have kind of a hard time seeing that happen in today's day and age since, I mean, the world is a lot smaller, since mass media and internet. So, I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't, but and I'm not all that familiar with what happened after the first Olympics, but yeah, I mean, it would be interesting if that did happen, though, or something similar.
Hmm. Have you been keeping track at all of those, or like done any looking into the most recent Olympics?
I have not. I'm only marginally aware that it's even going on or started. Like I don't keep track or keep up with it at all.
I gotcha. I was just gonna bring up they for the opening ceremonies they actually played music like the boss theme from one of the Final Fantasy movies or not
Oh,
movies
nice.
games, and then like
Really?
one of the songs from Kingdom Hearts, and
I
like I guess all over there's anime stuff like at the actual places they're holding all the things at.
That's really interesting. I mean, it does sound like a very Japanese thing to do. I mean, it's it's a big part of their culture, so it
Yeah.
makes sense.
I know there's a lot of Godzilla fans that really want Godzilla to show up, which would be cool.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I wouldn't be surprised if they do something like that too.
Hmm. Especially like at the ending ceremonies, I could definitely see them do like Godzilla's there since he's the ambassador of tourism or something. I could totally see that.
Yeah, I mean, you ask most people, what do they know about Japan? And, if they were to give you a list, like Godzilla's got to be on it. People around the world, I'm sure internationally, it's synonymous with Japan, so it would make sense.
Yeah. That's one thing I will say I really appreciate about Gareth Edwards is I'm going to paraphrase, but he said in one of the bonus features for Godzilla 2014, he said that if you show anybody a silhouette of a dinosaur with fins on its back, 99% of everybody will say it's Godzilla. Like that, he's so iconic.
Yep, absolutely.
Speaking of Godzilla, that's actually the discussion for today's episode. We are going to be discussing what we want for a future Godzilla film, whether it's from Legendary or Toho. And of course, recently Godzilla Singular Point came out. Have you watched that?
I am way behind, and no, I haven't, but I definitely will. It's on my agenda, just haven't gotten around to it quite yet.
Okay, then I'll refrain from spoilers, but if you want to also bring up, more anime, whether it's a movie or TV show, go for that as well.
Okay, sure.
So to start things off, I guess we'll talk about what a lot of people are theorizing right now, and that's another MonsterVerse Godzilla film. Um, what would you want from another MonsterVerse Godzilla movie?
Uh, I haven't really given it too much thought, but and as far as the likelihood of it happening, yeah, I think it's very likely to happen, and I think you and I probably are mostly on the same page in that regard. But if there was to be another MonsterVerse film, I mean, I would like Godzilla to be in it. Really see just like a standalone Kong film or even a Kong versus anything really working. But like if I had to pick, I mean, I would like to see something like Biolante, in there if they were able to get the rights to something like that.
Hmm. I know Doherty talked extensively about Biolante and Gigan. He'd like to put in like a Godzilla 3.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that would make a lot of sense. I mean, they may be lesser known monsters, but I mean, let's be honest. Pretty much anyone within the Godzilla fandom knows who they are, and even if people, more casual fans, come to watch the films who aren't familiar with them, I don't see why they couldn't, really enjoy them.
Right, and I would, even though I'm not a huge fan of the MonsterVerse, as we all know, I think it'd be cool to see them, especially Biolante, with Hollywood effects, if done right. That would be really fantastic. Like the size they could give her, that'd be pretty wild.
Yeah, definitely. I think it would be something that would be really interesting to see. I mean, in the original film, Biolante, what they did with the effects, it's not really in that many shots of the film because, I mean, you can just imagine with all the, Biolante tentacle arms going everywhere, as it was a lot of wire work. But even for what they did, I mean, they did a great job with the original film. But because I think probably because it was such a complex suit to control it really didn't get a lot of screen time. So I think if there was a MonsterVerse version of it, it could finally get a good amount of screen time.
Right. And I'd be really curious what elements of Godzilla they would put into Biolante. I think that would be kind of cool to see how they would redesign her with the Godzilla, esque elements, and then, their own creative take on the Biolante character.
Yeah, definitely. I don't really feel like it would really necessarily need any elements from Godzilla. I mean, even with the original Biolante, like I guess you could argue there were some elements of Godzilla there in the design, but to be honest, I don't even really see it with the original.
That's fair. I think most of it's like Biolante appears to have like dorsal fins, but that's, really stretching it with what they are.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
yeah. And and to pedal back a bit here and bring up what you mentioned how you didn't think a Kong movie would, be as interesting or do as well. Um, I'm inclined to agree with that. There are rumors about Adam Wingard doing Son of Kong, but a friend of mine mentioned this recently. Son of Kong is easily the most. Now, King Kong Lives is pretty close, but I'd say Son of Kong is the most hated of the King Kong films, for the most.
That's entirely possible. I'm not too familiar with the history of the film itself, but like at the very least, it's definitely not a very well known film. Like I never even heard of the film until later in life. And I mean, I
Hmm.
was pretty familiar with the original King Kong. I grew up watching it, but Son of Kong, I had never even heard of that until I was probably a teenager.
Hmm. And yeah, and like I don't see Legendary doing a movie called Son of Kong because of how like non-existent that original film is. I don't see how it'd be a good marketing. People would relate it to the original, and the original is not well remembered. So I don't know. It wouldn't feel like. I don't think it would be a good idea to go that route, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there 100%. I don't think, even if there was to be a follow up Kong film, I can't see it being named Son of Kong or even anything reminiscent of that. That just doesn't seem to be a title for a film that you would expect to pull in audiences and the level of the MonsterVerse, would expect for such a big budget film.
Right. And like the whole like you had Godzilla and then you had Kong Skull Island and then you had Godzilla King of the Monsters and then Godzilla versus Kong. Like these movies are the titles are supposed to be Son of Kong sounds really small, to be honest. Oh, it's the Son of Kong.
Right,
Okay.
right.
It doesn't. I don't think it matches with the rest of the films, with its title at least.
Again, I agree. Even just on the idea of a follow up Kong movie, when you take into consideration just the path that the MonsterVerse has gone so far, I mean, obviously you started out with Godzilla, you had a big return. A lot of people wanted to go see first American-made Godzilla movie in what 16 years. So, it was like a big thing. And then what did they do for King of the Monsters? It's like they have to one up themselves. So now you have Godzilla, King Ghidorah, Rodan, Mothra all in the same movie. Well, how do you one up that? Well, you go with Godzilla versus King Kong. How do you one up Godzilla versus King Kong? The
Right.
absolute worst thing you could do if you wanted to one up yourself is just bring in a solo Kong movie. It just doesn't make sense if that were to be the case.
Right. I'm just imagining like you saw Godzilla and Kong Skull Island, and then you returned for Godzilla King of the Monsters and watched in thrill with Godzilla vs. Kong. Now, here is the next big blockbuster event of the Monsterverse Son of Kong.
And there he is, just hanging out in the Hollow Earth, just swinging on vines and doing whatever a monkey does, just hanging out. It sounds like a great plot for a movie. I'm sure that would bring in the big audiences.
Oh yeah, I bet I bet they would work out a deal with Disney so like it'd be on Disney Plus like a week after it came out to theaters. Yeah,
Yep, that
really drawing the family.
that sounds like exactly what would happen, more or less.
Oh boy. But yeah, and even like I know some people have been like they need to do a Destroy All Monsters where Godzilla and Kong team up and fight all the other monsters, just like Final Wars, but with both of them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea. I know, there's kind of mixed feelings, and we have these types of discussions fairly regularly here. And I know it can kind of get tiresome at times, just as to whether or not the MonsterVerse would continue and all that, or if it did, what direction would it take? And I wouldn't mind seeing another MonsterVerse film, but I don't know. Like I've enjoyed the MonsterVerse, to be honest with you. Like I've really enjoyed it, but I think it's kind of time to move on at this point. Like, if they did make another MonsterVerse film, a Destroy All Monsters film, I don't think that would be an inherently bad idea, but I don't know if it would do well enough to be worth continuing the franchise or.
I'd be interested in the idea of a Destroy All Monsters film, but for the Showa era, it took, you know, 15-ish years to get to that point. Or Final Wars, it took 50 years. Like when you do a big Final Wars Destroy All Monsters movie, it takes a long time. And there's a lot of buildup and there's a lot of stuff you got to put out before you do that. And I kind of feel like, we're 4 films in. We're going to get an anime for Kong, and we've got like some comics. That's not enough to have at least in my opinion, a big battle royale fight to the death with all these different monsters. It doesn't feel developed enough yet.
Yeah, I kind of understand where you're coming from. Like it doesn't really feel like it's earned that point yet, but at the same time, the way I would think of it is, you've really it feels like with the MonsterVerse, they've just kind of been throwing all the stops at the films up until this point. So
Hmm.
like I can see them just kind of jumping straight into that, even though it's some people might not feel like it's been earned to get to that point for a Destroy All Monsters film, but like if they did do something else and they were somehow able to acquire all the rights to the monsters and whatnot, I could see that. As to whether or not it would be successful, it seems that's up in the air, but like I wouldn't mind
Hmm.
seeing it for sure.
It would definitely be fun for a lot of people, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But kind of turning the wheel here. We've been discussing the MonsterVerse for a bit. Um, So you like anime. You haven't watched Singular Point all the way through. Have you watched a little bit of it or not at
I
all?
I have not seen anything from it. Just kind of I've run across a few spoilers for it, but I wasn't all that worried about those to begin with. But yeah,
Okay.
I haven't seen any of it.
Okay. Have you seen the anime trilogy of films?
I have, yes.
Okay. So based off of that and what little you know about Singular Point, I'll refrain from spoilers myself. Would you
Thank
want
you.
them to do more Godzilla anime stuff?
It, Not particularly. I mean, I've been hearing good things about Singular Point up until now. So like I've been seeing people say they want it to continue, but like uh, to be honest, I was never really that excited for it. Even though I like anime, I love Godzilla. Like on paper, it seems like it would be something I would be all in for. But to be honest, I've just never been that excited about Singular Point in the first place. So if they were to do more, I wouldn't be against it, but I don't know if I would really be hyped for it or anything like that.
I see. Is it because you like both of them, but together it just kind of doesn't work for you? Is that why you're not a huge fan of the idea?
Uh, Not necessarily that it doesn't work. I don't think it works. Well, other than, I mean, yeah, the anime films.
Hmm.
I didn't really care for those, but I don't really think that was so much of an issue with combining the medium of Godzilla with anime. But I think they more so didn't work just kind of on an individual level. But I don't know. It just doesn't seem. I wouldn't be able to get as excited for any Godzilla anime as I would for a Godzilla film. To me, Godzilla started with film. I enjoy Godzilla films, and as far as mixing with anime, like again, I'm not against it, but it just really doesn't get me that hyped up or anything.
Would you say it just doesn't feel exactly like Godzilla to you? Not that it isn't Godzilla, but like it doesn't feel right to an extent.
Yeah, that might be part of it. That might be part of it. It's hard to say. Like I said, I don't really know if I could give a specific reason for it. It's just maybe it's just not my thing, but I'm not
I
really sure
gotcha.
why.
I gotcha. So you wouldn't be opposed, but you're not for more animated Godzilla stuff, right?
Correct.
Okay, okay, I get you. I agree with you, but my reasoning is more the fact that I just don't like animation. Like I have a vendetta against it, and
Yeah.
and so like I just Godzilla anime has never sounded good to me. I don't care for I hate the anime trilogy. I've been very vocal about that. I enjoyed Singular Point for what it was. Um, I don't think it was bad, but like I'm not in a rush to rewatch it. Like I have no will to. But that being said, it's just like Godzilla for me doesn't work. I like him being live action. I like seeing Godzilla in a more, for the lack of a better term, realistic feel. And I don't get that with animation.
Yeah,
So
I completely
you know,
understand that. Yeah, definitely.
yeah. So my reasoning for that is a bit more, what's the word I'm looking for here? Uh, Pretentious? Maybe,
Maybe.
maybe not. But yeah, it's just not my thing. That being said, however, this next part can't speak tonight. We're going to talk about is Toho, and what Toho could possibly be doing with another Godzilla film.
Okay, great.
So, what would you want from a new Toho film?
Well, first and foremost, I want to see the live action suits back. Suitmation, it needs to come back. I don't want to see it as a dead art. And at this point, maybe it's not completely dead outside of like you know, more comedic comedy films with kaiju in them. But I'd love to see them bring Suitmation back for Godzilla. I don't have a
Hmm.
problem with CGI, but I think it needs to come back. I feel like if things keep going the way they are right now with CGI, if that seems like it's always the how to put this, it's always going to be if it's always going to be more profitable for them to do CGI or cheaper for them to do CGI. That kind of bothers me. Maybe it's nostalgia speaking for the old style of Godzilla films, but yeah, I don't want to see that disappear.
Hmm. Have you watched the coffee commercials that were commissioned for some Toho studio hands to do for Godzilla to be in it with the suit?
If it's new, no, I have not.
Okay,
I
I
was not
might
aware.
send you a link to that because what they did. You've seen the remodeled Godzilla 54 suit, like the one they made a few years back, right?
I believe I have, yes.
So they took that suit and they built a miniature city, and they're called Boss Coffee.
Okay,
They're
I'm sorry. Yes, I have seen it. I have seen it. I'm
okay.
sorry.
Would you want something like that?
Yes, absolutely. Mix the CGI, just a little bit of CGI for like effects and while still using the suit. That would be amazing.
Hmm. One thing I really appreciated about that commercial was the cinematography. Like the colors were so like high in contrast. It looked really good. I loved, especially the atomic breath.
Yeah, it was very vibrant looking. It was gorgeous. And just I
Uh,
mean
I
for a
know
commercial.
exactly for for a commercial that's they spent probably a few weeks on it, and like that, if they can do that for a commercial, imagine what they could do for a movie, you know?
Yeah, if the bottom line is if someone wants to do it, if that's the type of thinking that Toho has for the property, like if they want to get back into that, I have no doubt that they could really pull it off and make it look really good.
Hmm. I know Toho has said the way that they do the Godzilla films is they let the director decide what they want to do, which is kind of ironic, learning how much how many restraints Legendary had. Um, but I'd love to see Toho be open for their directors to be like, you want to do Suitmation, you can do that, but here's your budget. And they work within that budget. That would be cool.
Yeah, definitely. Even just hearing that like kind of gives me some confidence towards Toho because I mean, like you said, even just kind of knowing their history and the way they've done things in the past, which I realize we're living in obviously in a different time than the '60s and the way they were cranking out movies then. But just it, basically what that means to me is, if they can get the right director to come in there with the right vision, a good vision, to do suitmation, like you said, working within the constraints they give them, it can definitely be done. It's doable.
Hmm. Um, Speaking of that, so one film that people have talked about happening is a little known, a sequel to a little known film by a director that did some anime in the 90s and recently did like a trilogy of rebuild films. Um,
Who's that?
it's called, I think his name was Hideaki Anno. I could be wrong.
Oh, he
You
must be one of those
probably
up and
never heard of him.
comers.
Yeah,
Never
yeah.
heard of him.
Yeah, he's pretty unknown, to be honest. Like nobody knows who he is.
So what's he supposed to be doing?
So he made a movie called Shin Godzilla. And at the end of that movie, there was a little bit of a stinger. And a lot of people have been like, they should do a sequel to that movie. Even though it was never announced, a lot of people feel like Toho was going to do one. At the end of the day, the farthest that went was Hideaki Anno said if they were going to do a sequel, he did not want to do it. He would not be involved, and presumably, Shinji Higuchi would have directed it instead by himself.
Right, yeah. I do remember hearing about that as well, some time ago. And I have kind of mixed feelings on, doing a sequel on Shin. Initially, after when Shin first came out, I would have been all for it. I would have, I was absolutely on board for a sequel for the film. But at this point in time, I don't feel like it's necessary. Not only do I not think it's necessary, I really would like to see them go in a different direction entirely. And just the fact that they wouldn't be able to bring Hideaki Anno back on for the sequel, not nothing against Shinji Higuchi. I mean, he's done some great films as well, but I just, if anything, I would feel like Hideaki Anno would need to be back on board to complete whatever original vision he might have had for that. I don't see it working with another director taking over and changing directions.
Yeah, it's definitely Anno's Godzilla, and not letting him do what he wishes with it. To me, it just it because Shin's appeared in other stuff. You know, he appeared in the Shin Godzilla versus Evangelion 4D ride. He appeared in a few other short films, and it never, at least to me, it never felt the same like how Hideaki Anno executed him in his film.
Yeah, it's a very distinctly Anno Godzilla. I don't see anyone else being able to take over the reins and really being able to do it justice, frankly.
hmm One thing I would say though, of course we've both seen Shin Godzilla. At the end, the tail, it's the humanoid Godzillas that were going to be in the film, but they were eventually scrapped. Um, One thing I've thought about is, you know, we had the COVID-19 pandemic. We're still in it, but it'd be kind of interesting if they did do a sequel, maybe kind of base it off of that. Godzilla awakens, and he slowly gets smaller and smaller as these humanoids, you know, burst out of him, and they start trying to take over the world, and people have to go into a quarantine to an extent, hide from the monster, and they have to try and find a way to destroy them. That would be interesting, but I don't know. I don't know if it would fit the realistic world that Shin Godzilla established.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I agree. I'm not entirely sure that's something I personally would want to see. Although I know, I've heard, different people express opinions to the effect that they would want to see something come of that final scene with the humanoid looking things coming off of his tail. But personally, it's just not really something that interests me. Like when I go to watch a Godzilla movie, I want primarily Godzilla. I don't really not really
hmm
interested in seeing the primary threat being anything else. And so, while I do think it was a great cliffhanger at the end of the film, or I don't even know if cliffhanger is the right word to describe it, but I thought it was a great way to end the film with a kind of air of mystery surrounding, what could have become of Godzilla. But I think it's better left up to the imagination, frankly.
Right. And one thing I love is the interpretation so many people have about the scene. I know I've shared my interpretation with it, and like I really appreciate Anno's symbolism he put in the film, and I think that was one of his heaviest moments of symbolism in the film. So,
Yeah, I think it worked pretty well for the film itself. Again, just not really something I would be interested in seeing in a sequel personally.
right. But besides Shin Godzilla, there's also the rumored quote unquote world of Godzilla that Toho wants to make. It's a shared cinematic universe. Do you want to see that like a Showa era, but in the modern day?
This is the first I'm hearing of this, but could you maybe explain to me what do you mean by when you say Showa era during the modern day? Like what are we talking about?
So in the interview, the guy who basically is like the head of the Godzilla portion of Toho was like, "We want to do our own World of Godzilla cinematic universe, just like Marvel does their thing, where the Hulk has his own movie, and then Iron Man has his own movie, and they cross over in the Avengers. We want to do that with our monsters, like a Godzilla movie." In a Gigan movie and they cross over in a movie, or something along those lines. And a lot of people have compared it to how in the Showa era you had a Rodan movie, and then Rodan appeared in Godzilla films. Uh, Frankenstein versus Baragon. Baragon appeared in that, and then he came back for Destroy All Monsters, um, and so forth, so forth.
All right, I see. Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. I'd love to see that. I think I've al- I've always felt like one of the weaker points of the Showa era Godzilla films was the lack of continuity. And
hmm
some people don't like the Heisei films, but to me that's one of the better aspects of the Heisei films is they do at least follow some amount of continuity, and I really like that about them. I think if Toho was able to incorporate a more solid, running continuity throughout the films, I think that could be quite good for them.
Yeah, definitely. I'm with you 100%. I think it'd be good to see them try that again and hopefully succeed this time around.
Yeah, I think the advantage to doing that and just kind of following that, a Marvel-like formula and, following a continuity and introducing new characters, bringing them into kind of a cinematic universe is that what you're doing is you're getting people invested into those characters and you're taking time to get them invested in characters, or in this case, monsters. They get to
Hmm.
like the monsters and then you bring them into a new property and it's like a ball that just it keeps rolling and it keeps getting bigger. And I think that could potentially help the franchise out a lot from Toes end.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I would like to ask you, so it's pretty infamous throughout the franchise that almost every Godzilla film, except for every film since 2014, is directly connected to 54. Like that is the main point where all these other films come from. Obviously, 2014 didn't do that. 98 didn't do that. Shin Godzilla didn't do that. Would you want them if they went with this world of Godzilla? Would you want them to connect it to 54, or do you think enough time has passed? We should leave that film where it is and just start a new era of Godzilla.
I think there's a really good case to be made for starting a fresh continuity. Just be even if only for the fact that, as you just mentioned, so many of the other previous Godzilla films are connected to that one in continuity, and in the long run, you get so many films that are all connected to the same continuity, and yet none of or so few of them connect to each other. It gets convoluted quite quickly. So I kind of like the idea of connecting sequels to the original continuity of the original 1954 Godzilla, but I think I would also like to see if they could just start a fresh continuity with another film that's kind of has a similar tone to the original. Um, maybe somewhat in the way that Shin Godzilla was. I think that could work pretty well. Not necessarily a remake of the original film, but something that's strong enough to hold the continuity of newer films. I think that would work. I don't think it's necessary for them to connect it to the original film.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One thing appreciate about the way the franchise is really set up is, and this I will say I think there's a flaw in here. Um, Essentially, it's grouped into. Of course, we have the different eras. We've got Showa, Heisei Millennium, Hollywood, and Reiwa. Um, but the Showa, Heisei, Millennium have kind of been grouped into this quote unquote classic Godzilla era, which is like the same actors, the same special effects, suitmation, Ifukube, all that good stuff. A
Sure.
lot of people have grouped all 50 years of that into kind of its own part of the Godzilla franchise. And since then, starting with 2014, they've grouped all of this stuff into like the modern era of Godzilla, kind of like a new wave, starting with Shin Godzilla, um, really just trying to be its own new thing, trying to revamp the franchise to get away from the classic era, but still using Godzilla as he should be used. Unfortunately, one of the things lost so far is that suitmation, which I would agree with you. It's really sad to see that go.
Yeah, I think it kind of makes sense. I understand, why people would kind of separate those two timelines kind of from classic to the more modern era. And I think in a lot of ways, like Shin Godzilla kind of felt like it could have been a good start to that modern era, but um, I think it's probably best left as like a standalone film. And I think, if they kind of started to kind of get back to their roots in a sense, like we talked about with Suitmation. I think that could be really good for the series. I'm not sure how successful it would be, just in terms of like how would people react to it coming back to the Suitmation. Would it be more of a reaction like it's just kind of outdated, and they'd probably have to just test it just to find out. But I think it would be
Hmm.
good to just kind of start fresh in a sense.
Hmm. Yeah, and I've always stood by this, and I will, I think, forever stand by this. Shin Godzilla, even though I'm not a fan of it, is perfect by itself. I feel like adding on to it would lose some of that purity that it does have. So any film going forward, I really hope Toho does not go with the let's connect it to Shin Godzilla route.
Yeah, and I think audiences are probably ready for the kind of a new generation to come along, and I think Shin Godzilla is perfectly fine, just kind of standing in the middle there on its own in the Toho era of films, and I think it could work pretty well for them if they just kind of gave the series a new start.
Hmm. Speaking of that, I'm gonna find a way to loop us right back around to where we started here. An interesting thing to note is the Toho universe really started in 1964. That was really when Toho started pushing their productions to be tokusatsu, Godzilla, Mothra, Ghidorah. Eventually, it would go on to do like Zone Fighter and whatnot. It started in 1964. And the reason for that was in 1964, Japan held its very first Olympics. And Japan really started pushing itself to a more global viewpoint for other countries to look at them and acknowledge their existence. And here we are, 60-ish years. I think it's 50 years later, approximately.
Close enough.
And here we have Tokyo Olympics 2020. And I think this is the perfect time for Toho to look at what they've got. They've got a very much alive property that's just aching to come back out for people to watch, for people to enjoy, for people to buy as much merchandise as they can make thanks to Bandai. um, I think the time is now. I think Godzilla has been building itself up, um, but almost kind of reserved in a way with the PS4 game, with the MonsterVerse, with Shin Godzilla, with this anime stuff. They're really starting to push Godzilla for a wider audience. And I think we're about ready to see Godzilla come back full force, whether that be more legendary films or co-productions with Toho or Toho doing their own thing. And while they're doing their own thing, they have animes on Netflix. The time I think is now for Toho to jump on that. And I think the Godzilla franchise is about to be revived in a way that we haven't seen it in a long time, which I think is awesome.
I completely agree, and I really do hope so. I think now, like you said, I think now strike while the iron's hot. I think they need to really capitalize on this, and I really hope they do. I mean, I've always been of the opinion that more Godzilla is less than better Godzilla. Even if there are going to be some misses in there for some of the fandom, but I mean, hopefully it can be successful enough that they can continue it on. And I mean, I'm always ready for a new Godzilla movie, and I think now is again, I completely agree with you, the best time to really capitalize on that for them.
Absolutely. Even you brought up how more Godzilla is better than less. I mean, even for me, like I didn't like Godzilla versus Kong, but I still saw it 8 times because it is a new Godzilla film. It is the beginning of something special, I think, and it's history. It's the second time these characters came together, and I'm of even though I sit on this podcast, and every other week I'm like, the MonsterVerse is garbage. They shouldn't exist. But in all reality, more is better than less. And this one may not work, but what's to say the next one won't? You know, the anticipation, the build up for whatever's next is really high for a lot of people, and I'm one of them. So
Yeah, and even if whatever they do next, even if it isn't as successful as they hoped, there's always going to be more Godzilla. I mean, look, the franchise has endured for this many years. It's not going to disappear anytime soon, even if it does take another break. Hopefully, it doesn't. Even if it has to, hopefully the world won't have ended before they can make some more. So they're always going to make some more, though.
that is one of my favorite things. You know, Godzilla may flop, and like we might not see Godzilla for a while, but Toho is dead set. Every 10 years, we will have something on that fourth year of whatever decade it is. We may not get anything for next year or the year after, but I guarantee you, 2024, we're getting a Godzilla film. I guarantee it, no matter what it is.
Definitely, and even if Toho were to go under, be sold, whatever, like somebody's going to revive the IP of Godzilla. It's not going to be a dead property forever. It's just, I don't think it can die at this point.
hmm I'm trying to remember the quote. Raymond Burr said it in Godzilla 85. Um, oh, what was it? The reckless ambitions of man are often dwarfed by their dangerous consequences. For now, Godzilla, that strangely innocent and tragic monster, has gone to Earth. Whether he returns or not, or is never seen again by human eyes, the things he has taught us remain. And I think the fact that they remain, he will always come back. He cannot be. You can't take him down. He's the king of the
Beautiful,
monsters.
beautiful.
So that's actually I've got nothing else to say. I've said pretty much all I can.
Same for me. If they do make another Godzilla movie, I'm just gonna put this out there. I want to see lots of explosions and lots of city destruction and buildings crumbling and all that good stuff. That's what I want. That's at the end of the day, that's what I want. I know some people say they want great story and characters, and I'm just gonna throw it out there. He's crushing stuff. I'm all right.
Yeah. I say why not both, but that is
Oh,
a
I want both.
debate
I
for
want both,
another
but
day.
I'll be good as long as the city crumbles. I'll be good.
uh, well, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. Thank you, Jurgen, for coming on at such short notice. This was a great conversation. Time really flew by. Do you have anything you want to promote? Any, Twitters or, YouTube channels or projects you're working on? Now, the floor is yours. If you want to promote anything, go for it.
Nope, nope, nothing to promote. Thank you, though. I appreciate you letting me be on the podcast, and I was glad I could come on here.
It was a lot of fun. Before we head out, though, just a few things for me to plug. I am Elijah, the host. I have a Twitter at ET13 Productions or at E as an Elephant Thomas 1975. I also have an Instagram at ET13 Productions and a YouTube channel called ET13 Productions. As for the podcast, if you haven't already, please review us on Apple Podcasts. We have recently been review bombed by a ton of one-star reviews, and it's a little sad, but I have firm belief that our listeners can push that average star point from the 2.7, I think it's at right now, above a 3. I would really appreciate if you guys did that. It helps us get recommended to more people that have the same love that you have of Kaiju and Tokusatsu. If you don't have an Apple device and you can't review us that way, I don't blame you about not having an Apple device because I don't. I think they're garbage. You can tweet us and follow us on Twitter at KAIJU_CONVERS. If you don't have either of those, you can like us on Facebook or follow us on Instagram and contact us through that way. If you're like me before podcasting and you don't have any social media, which lucky you, it's that is the life to live without social media. You can email us at kaijuconversation@gmail.com, all lowercase, all one word. You know the drill. We also have a Teespring if you want to check us out. It's just our logos and on a bunch of stuff. Eventually, we'll do some other stuff, but that's all we got for now. And as always, we will read your reviews on air for everybody to hear. We greatly appreciate you reviewing us. I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. If you'd like to chat with me one-on-one, or Rex, or Jurgen even, or even be on a podcast episode, why not join our Discord server where we have a lot of fun conversations and we have monthly podcast recordings. It's a lot of fun here and I enjoy it so very much. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We do have exclusives on there. An interview with the designer of Mechagodzilla 2021 is there. We also have a series that is starting back up called Toku Fandom Tales, where once every other month I pull a person from our Discord server, interview them for 10 minutes, so you get to know the people in our community that are just like you, to make you feel more at home in the Kaiju Conversation community. A huge thanks to Rex for editing these episodes, especially this one, because this was a very last minute recording. Thank you, Rex. We appreciate you so very much. His stuff can be found in the description below. Thank you, Jurgen, once again, and thank you guys for listening. And please remember, life's too short to not talk big. Bye, guys.
Bye.